One man built a mass movement so vast that the United States government decided they had to destroy it. And when they couldn't find a legitimate reason to lock him up, they decided to invent a crime instead. By the early 1900s, slavery in America had been legally abolished for decades, but the reality on the ground was a system designed to keep Black Americans firmly subjugated. Through the economic exploitation of sharecropping, millions were trapped in cycles of debt and brutal manual labor. This economic trap was reinforced by Jim Crow laws, a legally sanctioned system of daily humiliation that violently maintained a strict racial hierarchy across the country. Meanwhile, in Jamaica, a young printer named Marcus Garvey was surrounded by books and political literature. Watching this global exploitation unfold, he asked a question that would soon terrify colonial powers. Where is the Black man's government? Where is his king and his country? To answer that question, Garvey sailed for the United States. He arrived in Harlem, New York, in 1916, with almost no money to his name. But he brought a fiercely uncompromising message of Black pride and total self-reliance. He established the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA. Its goal was what he called African redemption, liberating the African continent from European colonial rule and uniting the global diaspora into a single political force. Garvey was not interested in asking white society for integration or begging for a seat at their table. He was organizing millions of people to build an entirely independent table of their own. When the movement's headquarters moved to Harlem, the UNIA grew into the largest Pan-African movement history had ever seen. At its peak in the 1920s, the organization boasted millions of followers and over 800 chapters spanning 40 countries. With its own civil service, nurses' corps, and marching bands, the UNIA functioned almost like a nation within a nation. The driving force behind this growth was Garveyism, a philosophy built on the premise that political freedom is completely impossible without economic independence from the white capitalist structure. To prove this was possible, Garvey launched his most ambitious project, the Black Star Line. This was an entirely Black-owned and operated fleet of steamships designed to connect the global African diaspora through direct trade and passenger travel. This $5 stock certificate reveals their ingenious funding model. Instead of relying on traditional banks, the UNIA sold shares directly to its working-class members in small installments. Buying this stock provided a tangible piece of ownership in an enterprise dedicated to collective liberation. And it worked. The Black Star Line successfully purchased its first massive vessel, the SS
Yarmouth, manned entirely by Black seamen and officers. This physical infrastructure deeply alarmed colonial governments across the world. A successful, global Black-owned shipping line proved that reliance on the existing economic order was a choice, and that true independence was achievable. The United States government saw this economic power as a direct threat to national security. The counterattack was spearheaded by a young Justice Department bureaucrat named J. Edgar Hoover. Hoover opened a file on Garvey, determined to brand him as a dangerous radical agitator. But despite extensive surveillance, the Bureau of Investigation couldn't find a single shred of evidence tying him to sedition or treason. So Hoover changed tactics. He authorized the hiring of the Bureau's first ever Black agent, specifically to infiltrate the UNIA rallies and offices to dig for any possible financial misstep. They eventually found their excuse. In 1922, the government indicted Garvey for mail fraud, for sending a circular advertising a ship the Black Star Line had placed a massive deposit on, but did not yet fully own. The trial was highly targeted. Garvey was convicted and sentenced to serve time in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, removing him from his empire. After immense public pressure, President Calvin Coolidge commuted the remainder of the sentence in 1927, but it was a hollow victory. Upon release, Garvey was immediately deported back to Jamaica, physically exiling him from his power base in Harlem. The government's logic was simple and ruthless. They believed that by using the legal system to cage and exile the architect, the entire movement for Black economic power would collapse in his absence. By May 1940, Garvey was living out his final days in a rented house in London. He was recovering from a severe stroke, estranged from his family, and largely cut off from the mass movement he had built.
Then came the final tragic blow. While reading the daily papers, Garvey came across his own obituaries, erroneously published, highly critical accounts written by his enemies. The shock of reading these damning reports triggered a second massive stroke. He died 2 weeks later. Hoover and the authorities had won their war against the man, but they failed to realize that Garvey's ideology had already outgrown the UNIA, taking root across the globe. His ideas survived generationally, passing directly from parents to children. The parents of Malcolm X, for example, were dedicated UNIA members who raised him on a strict foundation of Garveyism, ideas he would heavily draw upon as a leader. And across the Atlantic, his vision of African redemption inspired a new generation of leaders, like Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, who would use those exact principles to organize and overthrow colonial rule on the African continent. Government sabotage could sink ships and deport leaders, but it could not erase the structural framework Garvey left behind. From the streets of Harlem to the independence movements of West Africa, his model for economic and political self-determination provided the practical foundation for the next half-century of global Black resistance.